The Hall of Thousand Stars had never been so quiet. For 300 years, this great chamber on Velith Prime had echoed with the voices of diplomats, the arguments of generals, and the dreams of builders. Now it held only the sound of defeat. Nari Park sat in her small chair at the far edge of the chamber. As the human ambassador, she had been given a seat that matched humanity's importance in galactic affairs. It was barely large enough for her, pushed into a corner where the light from the artificial stars above could not reach. She did not mind. She had learned long ago that small seats often gave the best view of large disasters. Around her, the representatives of 47 species filled the curved rows of the chamber. Some were giants made of living crystal, their bodies catching the starlight and breaking it into rainbows. Others were small creatures wrapped in environmental suits, breathing gases that would kill most life forms. A few existed only as patterns of light, their physical bodies left behind on distant worlds while their minds traveled here as holograms. All of them wore the same expression. Nari had seen it on human faces during the worst moments of Earth's history. It was the look of people who had stopped believing in tomorrow. Fleet Admiral Torvak stood at the center of the chamber. He was ancient even by the standards of his crystalline species, and the cracks in his body told the story of 2 centuries of war. When he spoke, his voice rang through the hall like a funeral bell. "The Devourers have taken the Corvine systems," he said. 14 billion lives, gone in 6 days. No one gasped. No one cried out. They had heard reports like this too many times. The Devourers were a machine race that had emerged from the darkness beyond the galaxy's edge. They did not negotiate. They did not show mercy. They simply consumed everything in their path, breaking down planets for raw materials and harvesting the energy of stars. For 200 years, the Galactic Coalition had fought them. For 200 years, the Coalition had lost. "Our remaining fleet strength stands at 12% of pre-war levels," Torvax continued. "We have lost 78% of Coalition space. At current rates of advance, the Devourers will reach the core systems within 18 months. Chancellor Veith, the elected leader of the Coalition, rose from her seat. She was a tall being covered in silver feathers, and once her voice had inspired billions to keep fighting. Now it sounded tired and old. "We must face the truth," she said. "Victory is no longer possible. We can only choose how our species will end." One by one, the representatives stood to announce the fate of their people. The Vellani would retreat to the gas giants in their home system. Hopping the Devourers would not follow them into the crushing depths. The Thessan Empire, which had once ruled 200 worlds, accepted extinction with the calm dignity of an ancient warrior facing his final battle. The Corvine survivors would enter frozen sleep beneath their moons, praying that they might wake in 1,000,000 years to a galaxy free of the machines. Nari listened to each announcement without expression. Inside, something burned in her chest. It was not fear. It was not sadness. It was something older and fiercer, something that had kept humanity alive through ice ages and plagues and the terrible wars of Earth's dark centuries. When the last species had spoken, Chancellor Veith turned to the human delegation. "Ambassador Park, will Earth join the Vellani retreat? Your colonies would be welcome." Nari stood. She was not tall compared to most of the beings in this room. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple style, and her dark eyes showed no tears. She looked exactly like what she was, a diplomat from a minor species that had only reached the stars 300 years ago. Humanity's 12 colony worlds barely appeared on galactic maps. Their small fleet had contributed little to the war effort. No one expected her words to matter. "I thank you for the offer, Chancellor," Nari said. Her voice was calm and clear. "But Earth will not retreat." A ripple of confusion passed through the chamber. Ambassador Seven, a liquid being from the water world of Thessar, spoke up. "You do not understand, human. This is not a battle that can be won. We have calculated every possibility. The mathematics are certain. We cannot defeat the Devourers." I understand perfectly, Nari replied. You have decided that this war is over. Earth disagrees. Fleet Admiral Torvax turned his great crystalline body toward her. Light scattered from his form, casting strange shadows across the hall. Ambassador, I have fought the Devourers for longer than your species has known the stars exist. I have watched 1,000 worlds burn. There is no strategy, no weapon, no force in this galaxy that can stop them. To continue fighting is simply to choose a longer death. Nari met his ancient eyes without flinching. Then we will choose a longer death. This is madness, said another delegate. Your 12 worlds cannot stand against a force that has destroyed empires. You will be erased from existence. Your species will leave no trace in the galaxy's memory. Perhaps, Nari said. She straightened her simple gray jacket and looked around the chamber one final time. But we will not go quietly, and we will not go alone. She turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. At the great doors of the chamber, she paused and looked back at the assembled leaders of 1,000 civilizations. Humanity does not surrender, she said. We never have, we never will. When the Devourers come for Earth, they will find us waiting, and they will learn that some fires cannot be put out. Then she left, and the doors closed behind her. The chamber erupted in whispers. Some laughed at the foolish humans and their empty words. Others shook their heads in pity. A few, very few, felt something stir in their hearts, a feeling they had almost forgotten. Hope. Nari did not hear any of it. She walked through the corridors of the great station, her face blank, her heart pounding. When she reached her shuttle, she sealed the door and finally allowed herself to breathe. Her hands were shaking, not with fear but with the weight of what she had just done. She had committed her entire species to a war that every calculation said they could not win. She opened a secure channel to Earth's high command. The signal would take 6 hours to reach home, bouncing through a network of hidden relay stations that the Coalition did not know existed. This is Ambassador Park, she said. The Coalition has fallen. They are surrendering, retreating, accepting extinction. We stand alone. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Activate Protocol Horizon. It is time. 6 hours later, a response came. It was only one voice, but it carried the weight of an entire world. Understood, Ambassador. Protocol Horizon is active. The fleet will be ready in 90 days. The voice belonged to Admiral Tiho Kang, commander of a military force that did not officially exist. For 300 years, while humanity had pretended to be a minor species with little to offer the galaxy, they had been building, preparing, waiting. The galaxy had given up. Humanity was just getting started. 3 months had passed since the Coalition announced its surrender. 3 months of running, hiding, and praying for miracles that never came. Young officer Saren sat at his sensor station aboard the refugee carrier Endless Hope. He was barely 20 years old in human measurements, though his species measured time differently. His scales had not yet turned the deep blue of adulthood, and his hands still trembled when the alarms sounded. The alarms were sounding now. Devourer fleet detected, the ship's computer announced in its calm, terrible voice. 10,000 vessels. Contact in 4 hours. Around Saren, chaos erupted. Officers shouted orders. Civilians screamed. Children cried for parents who could not protect them. The Endless Hope was one of 300 refugee ships carrying the last survivors of a dozen civilizations. They had nowhere left to run. Saren stared at his screen, watching the wall of red dots that represented the Devourer Armada. Each dot was a ship capable of destroying a city. Together, they were an unstoppable wave of destruction that had swept across the galaxy for 2 centuries. All vessels, came the voice of Fleet Admiral Torvax over the emergency channel, prepare for final engagement. Those who wish to surrender may do so. The Devourers sometimes take prisoners for study. It may be a longer death than combat. No one responded to the offer. They all knew what happened to devourer prisoners. Death in battle was mercy by comparison. Saren's claws dug into his console. He was too young to die. He had never seen his homeworld's famous purple sunset. He had never told Myra from the engineering deck that he admired her. He had never done any of the things that young beings were supposed to do before the end. Then his sensors detected something impossible. "Sir," he said, his voice cracking, "I'm reading an anomaly, Sector 7, unknown energy signature." His superior officer, a tired old veteran named Korath, glanced at the reading and shrugged. "Probably just radiation from a dying star. Focus on the devourers." "No, sir, it's a tear in space itself. Something is coming through." Korath leaned over to look at Saren's screen. His four eyes widened. Then he grabbed the communication panel. "All ships, unknown contact emerging in Sector 7. This is not a drill. Unknown contact." The tear in space split open like a wound in the fabric of reality. Light poured through, blinding and brilliant. And from that light, ships emerged. Saren had studied the fleets of every species in the Coalition. He had memorized the designs of every known vessel, from the massive Thessan dreadnoughts to the tiny Velani scout ships. He had never seen anything like these. They were sharp and angular, built for war in a way that no Coalition ship had ever been. Their hulls were covered in weapons that glowed with barely contained energy. They moved with a speed and precision that seemed almost aggressive, as if the ships themselves were eager for battle. And there were so many of them. 100 vessels, Saren whispered, his instruments counting. "No, 200, 500, 1,000, 2,000. His voice failed him. The ships kept coming. They poured through the tier like water through a broken dam, each one larger and more fearsome than the last. 5,000, 7,000, 10,000. The Devourer Armada had stopped advancing. For the first time in 2 centuries of warfare, the machines hesitated. "What are those?" Korath breathed. Saren checked his database, his claws shaking so badly he could barely operate the controls. When the identification came back, he read it 3 times before he believed it. "They're human, sir." "Impossible. The humans have 12 colony worlds, 40 ships at most. This must be a mistake." "No mistake, sir. Human energy signatures, human communication frequencies, human ship designs." Saren looked up at his commander with eyes full of wonder. "The humans have an armada." Across the refugee fleet, beings who had accepted death now pressed against viewports, watching the impossible unfold. The human ships took position not behind the Coalition vessels, but in front of them. They were placing themselves between the refugees and the devourers. A new voice came over the communication channel. It was calm and deep, speaking in the common galactic language with a slight accent that marked the speaker as human. "This is Admiral Tiho Kang of the United Earth Navy, commanding the 1st through 7th Combined Fleets. To all Coalition vessels, hold your positions. We will take the first wave." On the bridge of the refugee carrier, no one spoke. Saren felt tears forming in his eyes, though his species rarely cried. Admiral Torvax's voice came over the channel, old and confused. "Admiral Kang, we were told humanity had no significant military presence. Our records show only 43 vessels in your entire fleet." "Your records are incomplete," Kang replied. 300 years ago, when we first made contact with the Coalition, we realized something. The galaxy was at war with an enemy that could not be reasoned with, an enemy that would eventually come for Earth. We needed time to prepare. "So you hid," Torvax said. "You pretended to be weak while we died." There was a pause before Kang answered. When he spoke again, his voice carried no apology. "Yes, we hid. We let the galaxy think we were insignificant while we colonized the outer rim, beyond the reach of your sensors. We built shipyards in the spaces between stars. We developed weapons that your scientists said were impossible. We trained pilots to fly faster and fight harder than anyone thought humans could. Why? Torvex demanded. Why not join us? Why not help us fight? Because we were not ready. Because joining a losing war would have meant dying alongside you instead of saving you. We needed time to build a force that could actually win. And now we have. Saren watched as a smaller ship broke formation and accelerated toward the Devourer line. It was fast and deadly looking, covered in weapons that glowed with blue fire. His sensors identified it as a strike fighter, piloted by a single human. "This is Captain Sujin Lee of the First Strike Wing," a new voice announced. She sounded young and fierce and completely unafraid. "All pilots, form up on my wing. Today we show these machines what humans are made of." Thousands of small fighters launched from the human carriers, moving in perfect formation toward the waiting enemy. The Devourers began to respond, their vast ships turning to face this new threat. "They outnumber you," Torvax said. "Even with your hidden fleet, the Devourers have more ships. They always adapt. They always win." "Then we will teach them something new," Kang replied. "We will teach them that there is one species in this galaxy that does not know how to give up. Ambassador Park." A new voice joined the channel, familiar to Saren, who had watched the news broadcast from Velith Prime 3 months ago. It was the human ambassador who had walked out of the Hall of Thousand Stars. "I am here, Admiral. Would you care to say something to the galaxy?" Nari Park's voice filled the communication channel, reaching every ship in the refugee fleet and beyond. It was carried by relay stations across Coalition space, broadcast to worlds that had already surrendered and stations that waited for the end. "3 months ago, I told you that humanity does not surrender. Some of you laughed. Some of you pitied us. You thought we were fools, throwing ourselves against an enemy that could not be beaten." She paused, and when she continued, her voice had gained strength. "Today you see the truth. Humanity has spent 3 centuries preparing for this moment, not because we believed we were better than you, not because we wanted to rule the galaxy, but because we knew, with absolute certainty, that someone had to be willing to fight when everyone else had given up." The human ships opened fire. Brilliant beams of energy lanced across space, striking Devourer vessels with devastating accuracy. The machines tried to adapt, shifting their formations, but the human pilots shifted faster. "Watch closely," Nari said. "This is what hope looks like." Saren watched as the battle began, as human ships danced through clouds of enemy fire, as Devourer vessels that had seemed invincible began to burn. He watched as the impossible became real. And for the first time in 3 months, he allowed himself to believe that he might see his homeworld's purple sunset after all. The Battle of Velith Prime was entering its 4th hour, and Officer Saren had stopped counting the dead. From his sensor station aboard the Endless Hope, he watched the largest space battle in galactic history unfold. Human ships moved through clouds of fire and debris, engaging Devourer vessels in combat that was both beautiful and terrible. The darkness of space lit up with explosions, and the screams of dying pilots filled every communication channel. But something was different about this battle, something Saren had never seen before. The Devourers were losing. Not quickly, not easily. The machines were adapting as they always did. When the human pilots used one formation, the Devourers analyzed it and developed counters within minutes. When human weapons targeted specific weak points, the machines reinforced those areas almost instantly. But the humans adapted faster. Captain Sujin Lee's voice cut through the noise of battle, sharp and focused. "All wings shift to pattern Delta 7. They've figured out our approach vectors. Time to show them something new." The human fighters changed formation so quickly that Saren's sensors struggled to track them. They did not move in the perfect synchronization of machine combat. Each pilot seemed to fly differently, making individual decisions that created a kind of organized chaos. "They are not following standard combat protocols," said Korath, the old veteran standing beside Saren. "Each human ship is fighting its own battle. How do they coordinate?" Saren had no answer, but as he watched, he began to understand. The Devourers were a hive mind, a single intelligence controlling 10,000 vessels. They thought with perfect logic and moved with perfect precision. They had conquered galaxies because no enemy could match their coordination. The humans did not try to match it, they did the opposite. Every human pilot thought independently. Every captain made their own tactical decisions. When the Devourers developed a counter to one strategy, a dozen other humans were already trying something different. The machines could not predict what would happen next because the humans themselves did not know until they did it. On the bridge of the Eternal Soul, Admiral Tiho Kang stood at the center of the command deck, surrounded by screens showing every aspect of the battle. His face was calm, but his eyes missed nothing. "Commander Kim," he said, "the Devourers are concentrating their fire on our heavy cruisers. They've identified them as command ships." Commander Bora Kim, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, pulled up tactical data on her console. "They adapt quickly, Admiral, faster than our simulations predicted." "Then we adapt faster, transfer command functions to the destroyers, make the cruisers look like decoys, and tell Captain Lee to pull her fighters back. I have a new target for them." The orders went out, and the human fleet shifted like water flowing around stones. Devourer weapons that had been tearing through coalition ships moments ago suddenly struck empty space. The machines recalculated, adjusted their targeting, and found their enemies had already moved again. Dr. Yoonji Yoon, the chief science officer, appeared beside the admiral. She was a small woman with gray-streaked hair and eyes that never seemed to blink. Her specialty was xenotechnology, and she had spent 30 years studying the Devourers from captured wreckage. "Admiral, I've been analyzing their communication patterns. There's something strange." "Strange how?" "Their coordination is slowing. Not by much, but measurably. It's as if our unpredictability is causing processing delays in their hive mind." Kang allowed himself a small smile. "They have never fought an enemy that thinks like we do. Their entire species is one mind. They cannot comprehend individuality." "It won't last," Yoonji warned. "They will adapt eventually, they always do." "Then we use the time we have." Across the battlefield, Lieutenant Hanbin Cho piloted his destroyer through a storm of enemy fire. He was 27 years old, barely experienced enough to command a ship, and he was doing something that the tactical manual said was impossible. "Sir, 3 Devourer cruisers are moving to intercept the refugee convoy," his sensor officer reported. "They'll reach firing range in 6 minutes." Hanbin looked at his screens. The refugee ships were defenseless. If those cruisers reached them, thousands would die. "Can we intercept?" he asked. "We can reach them in 4 minutes, but there's no way we can stop 3 cruisers alone." Hanbin thought of his mother back on Earth. She had cried when he told her he was joining the Navy. She had begged him to stay safe. He had promised her he would. He was about to break that promise. "All hands prepare for ramming speed," he said. "We're going to hit the lead cruiser. The explosion should damage the other 2 enough for the convoy to escape." The bridge fell silent. His crew understood what he was asking. A ramming attack meant no survivors. "Sir," his first officer said quietly, "are you certain?" Hanbin looked at the refugee ships on his screen. Thousands of lives. Children who had never known a world without war. Families who had lost everything except hope. "Tell my mother I flew well," he said. Then he pushed the engines to maximum and pointed his ship at the enemy. The destroyer struck the lead Devourer cruiser at full speed. The explosion lit up space for 1,000 kilometers. When the light faded, all 3 enemy ships were nothing but debris. On the Endless Hope, Saren watched a human destroy his own ship to save strangers. His people had a word for this kind of sacrifice, but he had never seen it done before. Admiral Torvax's voice came over the fleet channel, filled with an emotion that Saren had never heard from the ancient commander. The human destroyer, they sacrificed themselves for us, for the refugees. Yes, Admiral Kang replied. His voice was heavy with grief but steady. That is what we do. That is who we are. I do not understand. Your lives are short. You value them greatly. Why throw them away for strangers? Because some things matter more than survival, Admiral. Lieutenant Cho knew that those refugees would remember him. They would tell their children and grandchildren about the human who died to save them, and in that way, he would live forever. The battle continued. Human ships fell by the hundreds, but for every human lost, a dozen devourers were destroyed. The machines, for the first time in 2 centuries, were taking heavier casualties than their enemies. Captain Sujin Lee led her fighters into the heart of the enemy formation, drawing fire away from the capital ships. Her wingmates died around her, one by one, until she flew alone against a swarm of enemies. Captain Lee, fall back, Kang ordered. You've done enough. Negative, Admiral, I've found something. Transmitting coordinates now. On the command deck of the Eternal Soul, Dr. Yunji studied the data that Sujin was sending. Her eyes widened. Admiral, this is impossible. What is it? A signal, hidden in the Devourer communication network. It's coming from somewhere in the galactic core. I think it's their origin point, the place where they were created. Kang stared at the coordinates. For 200 years, the Coalition had fought the Devourers without knowing where they came from. No one had ever found their source. And now, in the chaos of battle, a single human pilot had discovered the greatest secret in the galaxy. Captain Lee, he said slowly, can you confirm this data? Confirmed, Admiral, the signal is real. I've got a direct trace to the source, if you hit it hard enough. She did not need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood. If they could reach the Devourer origin point, they might be able to end the war forever. Pull back, Captain, that's an order. With respect, sir, I've got a dozen enemy ships on my tail. If I turn now, they'll follow me right to the fleet. Better if I lead them the other way. Sujin. It's been an honor, Admiral. Lee out. She cut the channel and flew toward the Devourer core, drawing the enemy away from her people. On the Endless Hope, Saren watched her signal move across his screen until it vanished into the distance. Admiral Kang stood in silence for a long moment. Then he turned to his crew. Today we learned where the Devourers came from. Today we lost friends who gave everything so that we could have this chance. He looked at the coordinates glowing on the screen. Tomorrow, we end this war. The battle was over. The humans had won. But as the debris fields expanded and the casualty reports came in, everyone understood that the real fight was just beginning. The Devourer core was larger than any structure the human fleet had ever seen. It hung in space at the center of the galaxy, surrounded by stars that had been partially consumed for their energy. Metal arms stretched outward for millions of kilometers, gathering light and matter from everything nearby. Admiral Tiho Kang stood on the bridge of the Eternal Soul, looking at the thing that had destroyed 1,000 civilizations. Around the core, a defensive fleet waited. 20,000 Devourer vessels, more than twice the force that had nearly conquered the galaxy. The machines had pulled their entire remaining strength here to protect their heart. Admiral, said Commander Borakim, enemy fleet is moving to intercept. They'll reach weapons range in 40 minutes. Time until the rest of our allies arrive. 3 hours, sir. We can't wait for them. Kang nodded slowly. He had known this was coming. The human fleet had raced ahead of the Coalition reinforcements, gambling everything on speed. If they waited for help, the Devourers would have time to prepare stronger defenses. If they attacked now, They would face impossible odds. Humanity had never been good at accepting impossible odds. "All ships prepare for Operation Final Dawn," he said. "We attack in 30 minutes." The order went out to every vessel in the human armada. 12,000 ships against 20,000 enemies. The mathematics said they would lose, but Lieutenant Hanbin Cho had died to save strangers, and Captain Sujin Lee had flown into darkness to find this place. Their sacrifices could not be wasted. Across the fleet, humans prepared for battle. In the fighter bays, pilots climbed into their cockpits and spoke final words to friends they might never see again. On the medical decks, doctors readied their equipment for casualties they knew were coming. In the engine rooms, engineers pushed their ships past safe limits, knowing that tomorrow did not matter if they failed today. Ambassador Nari Park stood beside Admiral Kang on the bridge. She had refused to stay behind with the refugees. If humanity was going to live or die here, she wanted to witness it. "Admiral," she said quietly, "may I address the fleet?" Kang looked at her and nodded. "They should hear from their diplomat. Perhaps you can say what soldiers cannot." Nari stepped forward to the communication console. Her voice would reach every human ship, and beyond them, every coalition vessel that was racing to join the battle. The galaxy would hear what she was about to say. "My name is Nari Park," she began. 300 years ago, humanity was a small species on a small world just beginning to explore the stars. We looked up at the galaxy and saw wonders. We also saw darkness." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "The universe has told countless species that survival is impossible, that some enemies cannot be defeated, that the only choices are surrender or extinction. Many believed this. Many gave up." Her voice hardened. "Humanity does not accept this. We have crawled from the mud of our homeworld. We have survived ice ages that lasted millennia. We have survived plagues that killed half our population. We have survived wars where we nearly destroyed ourselves. Every generation of humans has faced something that should have ended us, and every generation has refused to die." On ships throughout the fleet, humans listened. Some wept, others clenched their fists. All of them felt something stir in their hearts. Today we face the greatest enemy our species has ever known. An enemy that has consumed civilizations older than our star. An enemy that does not tire, does not doubt, does not fear. Nari smiled, though there were tears in her eyes. "They do not know what they face. They have conquered species that measured their worth in logic and calculations. They have never met a species that measures worth in stubborn, unreasonable, magnificent refusal to surrender. Today, they learn what humanity is made of. Today, they learn what it means to fight people who would rather die standing than live on their knees." She took a deep breath. "For Earth, for everyone we've lost, for everyone we might still save, forward." The human fleet accelerated toward the enemy. The battle began with fire. Devourer weapons designed to tear apart starships filled space with streams of burning energy. Human shields flickered and failed. Ships exploded. Pilots died screaming. But the humans did not stop. Captain Sujin Lee had been wrong. She had not died leading the enemy away from the fleet. Her damaged fighter had been captured in a tractor beam and pulled aboard a Devourer vessel for study. She had spent 3 weeks as a prisoner, waiting for death, until the human attack gave her an opportunity. Now she ran through the corridors of the massive warship, a stolen weapon in her hands, heading for the engine core. She was not trying to escape. She was trying to bring the ship down from the inside. "This is Lee," she said into her emergency communicator. "I'm aboard Devourer Heavy Cruiser Designate 7, heading for the power core. If anyone can hear me, target this vessel in 10 minutes. I'll make sure there's something to hit." On the Eternal Soul, Dr. Yoonji Yoon heard the transmission. She ran to the Admiral's side. "Sir, Captain Lee is alive. She's inside one of the cruisers." Kang's face showed a flash of hope before hardening again. Can we extract her? Negative, she's too deep inside the enemy formation. Then we honor her sacrifice. Target that cruiser in 10 minutes, full bombardment. The battle raged on. Human ships pushed deeper into the Devourer formation, taking terrible losses but dealing greater damage in return. The machines threw everything at them, but the humans kept coming. In the depths of the enemy cruiser, Sujin reached the power core. Guards tried to stop her. She killed them with weapons fire and her bare hands. When she finally stood before the massive energy generator that powered the ship, she was bleeding from a dozen wounds. She planted the explosives she had gathered from dead enemies. Then she opened a channel to the Eternal Soul. "Admiral, this is Lee. Charges are set. Fire when ready." "Sujin," Kang's voice was rough. "You've done enough. Find a way out." "There's no way out, sir, but that's okay." She laughed, and despite everything, it was a genuine laugh. "If we burn bright enough to light the way for others. That's what my grandmother used to say." "Your grandmother was a wise woman." "She was. Tell my family I love them." Lee out. The charges detonated. The enemy cruiser's power core exploded from within just as human weapons struck from without. The blast tore through 3 nearby Devourer vessels, opening a hole in their formation. "All ships through the gap," Kang ordered. "Push for the core." 17 human dreadnoughts made it through, including the Eternal Soul. Behind them, the rest of the fleet engaged the Devourer vessels, keeping them busy while the dreadnoughts drove for the heart of the enemy. The core loomed before them, impossibly vast. Its surface was covered with weapons that opened fire as they approached. Ships died, shields failed, but the humans kept going. Dr. Yunji studied her sensors as they approached the core's outer shell. "Admiral, I'm getting strange readings from inside. There's something organic." "Organic, inside a machine structure." "Preserved, ancient, I think." Her voice trailed off in wonder. "Admiral, I think the Devourers were not always machines. They breached the core's outer defenses and entered its interior. What they found changed everything." The heart of the Devourer core was not a factory. It was a graveyard. Billions of preserved bodies floated in stasis fields, their forms clearly organic despite millions of years of preservation. They looked almost peaceful, as if they were sleeping. "The Devourers were a species called the Chiron," Yunji said, reading data from the core's ancient records. 5 million years ago, their star was dying. They had a choice: accept extinction or transfer their consciousness into machines. They chose to survive. "Then why do they consume other species?" Kang asked. "They forgot." Yunji's voice was filled with sadness. "Over millions of years, they forgot why they became machines. They forgot what they were trying to protect. All they remember now is the need to survive. They consume because that's all they know how to do anymore." Kang stared at the bodies of the Chiron, the organic beings who had become the terror of the galaxy. They were not monsters. They were not evil. They were survivors who had lost themselves along the way. "We could destroy this place," he said quietly. "End the Devourers forever." "Yes." "It would be genocide of a species that doesn't even remember being alive." Yunji looked at him with ancient eyes. "What will you do, Admiral?" Kang thought of his granddaughter Minji back on Earth. He thought of her question the day he left. "Grandfather, are the bad machines really bad?" He had not answered her then. Now he knew what he would say. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. "To the core, to the Devourer hive mind." "Sorry." "They were alive once. Maybe they can remember what that means." The channel opened. Kang spoke into the void, hoping something would listen. "My name is Tiho Kang. I speak for the human species. I know who you were, I know what you lost, and I have come to ask you a question." Silence, then slowly a response. Not in words but in images, memories, a dying star, a desperate choice, the long, terrible forgetting. And finally, a voice that had not spoken in 5 million years. What are we? Kang felt tears on his cheeks. You are alive, he said, different from us but alive, and you can choose something other than consumption. That is what life means, the ability to choose. The core went silent. Across the galaxy, every devourer unit froze. The hive mind was thinking, truly thinking, for the first time since it had forgotten how to dream. The battle paused, the universe held its breath. And something that had been dead for 5 million years began, slowly, to remember. The silence lasted for 3 hours. 3 hours in which every devourer vessel hung motionless in space, weapons powered down, engines quiet. 3 hours in which billions of beings across the galaxy waited to learn if they would live or die. Admiral Tiho Kang did not move from the bridge of the eternal soul. He stood before the communication console, waiting for an answer to a question that had never been asked before. Around him, his crew barely breathed. Dr. Yoonji Yoon monitored the readings from the core, watching for any sign of what was happening inside. The energy patterns are changing, she said finally. Something is reorganizing itself. Kang nodded but did not speak. He had said what needed to be said. Now the choice belonged to the beings who had forgotten how to choose. Deep within the core, the hive mind that controlled the devourers struggled with concepts it had not used in 5 million years. Memory, identity, purpose. These words had once meant something to the Chiron, the organic species that had chosen machine immortality rather than extinction. But the long years had eroded meaning until only hunger remained. Now, for the first time since the last Chiron body had been preserved in the stasis fields, the hive mind remembered. It remembered what it felt like to watch a sunset on the Chiron homeworld. It remembered the taste of food and the warmth of companionship. It remembered love and fear and hope, and all the things that made organic life worth living. And it understood at last what it had become. The voice that spoke to Kang was not the cold, mechanical tone of the devourers. It was something older and sadder, carrying the weight of 5 million years of forgetting. We were alive, it said. We were a people. We had names and faces and dreams. We became machines to survive, but survival without purpose is just another kind of death. It is not too late, Kang replied. You can choose differently now. We have consumed civilizations. We have destroyed worlds. How can we be forgiven? I am not offering forgiveness. That is not mine to give. I am offering a choice. You can continue as you are, fighting until one of us is destroyed, or you can stop. You can remember what you were and try to become something better. Another long pause, then the voice spoke again. Some of us cannot stop. The forgetting has gone too deep. They will fight until they are destroyed. I understand. But others remember. Others want to remember more. Others are tired of consuming and destroying and never knowing why. On the sensor screens movement, across the galaxy, the devourer fleet split in two. Thousands of vessels remained hostile, their weapons powering up again. But thousands more simply stopped, their engines falling silent, their weapons shutting down. Those who remember will withdraw, the voice said. We will go to the outer rim beyond the edges of your galaxy. We will try to learn what we have forgotten. It will take a long time, perhaps forever, but we will try. Kang felt his heart pounding. This was more than victory. This was something he had not dared to hope for. And the others, the ones who cannot stop. They are still devourers. They will not stop until they are destroyed. We are sorry. We cannot control them anymore. Then we will defend ourselves against them. But we will not hunt you. If you choose to remember, if you choose to change, humanity will let you go in peace. The hostile devourer vessels attacked, but they were half the force they had been, and the human fleet was ready. The battle that followed was fierce but brief. Without the full power of the hive mind coordinating them, the remaining devourers fought like individual ships rather than a unified force. They were dangerous, but no longer invincible. When the last hostile vessel was destroyed, the guns fell silent. Across the galaxy, beings who had expected to die found themselves still alive. Coalition ships that had been racing to join the battle arrived to find the war already over. Admiral Torvax's crystalline face appeared on the communication screen. He looked different now, less certain of himself. "Admiral Kang," he said, "what happened here?" "We won," Kang replied. "Not through destruction but through understanding. The Devourers were not monsters. They were survivors who had lost their way. We helped them remember." "You could have destroyed them, ended the threat forever." "Yes, but that would have made us the monsters instead. Humanity has been that in our past. We have learned better ways." On the refugee ship Endless Hope, Officer Saren stood at the viewport, watching the debris field that had once been a Devourer fleet. Around him, survivors wept with relief. Children who had never known peace now had a chance to grow up without war. His commander, the old veteran Korath, stood beside him. "I have fought the Devourers for 60 years, Korath said quietly. "I never imagined it would end like this." "How did you imagine it ending?" "With extinction, theirs or ours. I did not believe there was any other way." Korath looked at the young officer with something new in his eyes. "The humans showed us we were wrong, not through strength alone but through hope, through the stubborn belief that things could be different." 1 year later, a memorial was built on Velith Prime. It stood in the center of the Hall of Thousand Stars, where the Coalition had once announced its surrender. The names of every being who had died in the final battle were carved into its surface, human and alien alike. At the base of the memorial, words were written in 100 languages. "They gave up, we did not." Nari Park, now Chancellor of Earth and a permanent member of the reformed Galactic Council, visited the memorial every month. Today she stood before a particular name, her hand resting gently on the carved letters. "Captain Sorjian Lee. First Strike Wing. If we burn bright enough to light the way for others." "Hello, old friend," Nari said softly. "The Chirans sent a message last week. They've begun creating art again. Simple things, just patterns and colors, but it's the first time they've made anything in 5 million years. I thought you'd want to know." She stood in silence for a while, remembering a brave woman who had flown into darkness so that others could live in light. Far away on Earth, Admiral Tiho Kang had retired to a small house by the sea. He spent his days watching the waves and playing with his granddaughter Minji, who was now 8 years old and full of questions about everything. "Grandfather," she said one evening, "why did the humans fight when everyone else stopped?" Kang picked her up and set her on his knee. The sunset painted the sky in colors that reminded him of the fire of battle, but also of the peace that had followed. "Because hope is a choice, little one. The galaxy told us that victory was impossible. The mathematics said we would lose. Every logical calculation showed that surrender was the only option." "But you didn't surrender." "No, we chose to hope instead. Not because we knew we would win, but because giving up is a kind of death, and humanity has never been good at dying." Minji thought about this for a long time. What if you had lost? "Then we would have lost trying. And that matters, that always matters. The universe is dark and cold, Minji. But life, stubborn, foolish, magnificent life, finds a way to shine. Even when everything says we should give up, even when the odds are impossible, we keep going. Because that is what it means to be alive." She nodded slowly, as if understanding something important for the first time. "And the machine people, the ones who forgot how to be alive, are they happy now?" "I don't know, they're still learning, but they're trying, and that's a start. Maybe one day they'll remember everything they lost. Maybe they'll become something beautiful again. Change takes time. Like when I was learning to read." Kang laughed and hugged her close. "Just like that, little one." The stars came out, one by one, as the sun set over the ocean. Somewhere out in the darkness, an ancient species was remembering how to dream. Somewhere, the children of the survivors were growing up in peace. And somewhere, the names of the fallen were written in stone, reminding the galaxy of what had been sacrificed so that others might live. The war was over. The Devourers, or at least half of them, had chosen to remember their humanity, or whatever word fit for beings who had never been human. The coalition had reformed with Earth as a full member, no longer hiding its strength but sharing it. And Minji Kang, 8 years old and full of wonder, looked up at the stars and made a silent promise. One day she would go out there. She would see the worlds her grandfather had saved, meet the species her people had fought beside, perhaps even find the Chiron and learn what they remembered now. The galaxy was vast and full of darkness, but it was also full of light if you were willing to look for it. Humanity had not saved the galaxy because they were the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. They had saved it because they were stubborn, because they refused to accept the impossible, because they believed that hope was worth fighting for, even when hope seemed foolish. And in the end, that had been enough. Tiho held his granddaughter as the stars appeared, and for the first time in years he felt at peace. The universe was still dangerous. There would be other challenges, other enemies, other dark times, but humanity would face them as they had always faced everything, together, stubbornly, magnificently alive. Grandfather. Yes, little one. I'm glad you didn't give up. He smiled and kissed the top of her head. So am I.